Hey, great to be with you, Esben. I hope you and your family are safe and well. Listen, we are certainly living in a world of uncertainty and change right now, and I think we're all learning how to make uncertainty our friend and embrace change. But I am really excited to spend the next 30 minutes with you talking about a subject that, quite frankly, is I think near and dear to all our hearts, which is how do we as an industry meet the digital challenges um, with respect to the needs of the maritime industry. So, I wanted to just kind of maybe kick this off by saying that there are so many changes and challenges. I'm sure you see them. They're everything from what I call the 2Ds, digitization and decarbonization, to the 2Cs, which is COVID and carbon. And there's a lot of focus on technology and the rate of change of technology, the importance of regulations. One of the things I think that really important for all of us to just make sure we just don't forget is I think people are going to be the real heroes going forward. So I think for us, it's how do we get everyone ready for the new language of shipping, which is going to be CO2 emissions per ton mile?
Yeah, I thanks a lot, Chris, and I reciprocate your good wishes. You and I have met at various places over the years, including on treadmills in Stamford, Connecticut. But I think the human factor is it's talked about a lot, but unfortunately, it is just, in my view, too much talk, and it just is somehow or other not quite the recognition of the importance, not only of the here and now issue of seafarers being treated as the key workers that they are by many governments, but also the crew change and the mechanical problems that this COVID crisis has caused for the industry. So the problem is that in parallel with this, technology is changing so rapidly, as you so rightly outlined, in many areas, that how can we help develop tomorrow's seafarers when we don't quite know yet which way this is all going? I mean, that is a major challenge. But in generalization terms, we can certainly say that what we will need is a different skill set going forward, and that the adaptation of artificial intelligence and data and all these things, it will play a really, really crucial role. And so to me, I think the really important thing is we should as industry be reaching out much more actively and aggressively with the institutes of higher learning to compare notes on this. A number of owners are doing it bilaterally with specific universities, MSc, Maersk, to name two examples. But I mean, I think for smaller owners and for smaller associations, this is really, I think to me, this is a very, very important thing to start this whole process, start young, even going down to the schools to showcase shipping and to make the young aware that there's a huge amount of opportunity for people who are adaptable and bright and ready to go.
I totally agree with you. I think that one of the challenges that we have going forward, as I kind of look at where we are now relative to where we're going, is that I think the actual talent equation is going to change. The historical talent equation that we have all kind of worked on or worked, kind of as a blueprint, is really put a lot of emphasis on age and experience. And I think now, as we look forward, I think this talent equation is going to change. It's going to be more emphasis on technology and people and on learning. And I think that, and I agree with you, I think success going forward for all of us will be a team sport, and it's going to take a collective effort of the maritime schools, the ship owners, and quite frankly, even the vendors relative to the way the information now is coming. But I think probably that the single biggest commitment as we kind of deal with this new talent equation, it's going to be kind of a focus maybe less on training and more on learning, and specifically more on continuous learning, because, you know, with the change, the new technologies and the rate of change of technologies, you know, it is going to be an environment of fast learning, because that's basically what innovation is. It is fast learning. And so when you look at this, I think the commitment from the industry is going to be to create a continuous learning environment, which is going to be a combination of blended training, simulation, you know, different types of pathways. More so than this kind of what I call traditional, you know, training, certification, recertification environment going forward. I think that's going to be a big challenge for this industry as you begin to bring in kind of non-traditional skill sets with traditional skill sets, and you try to kind of marry around this recipe of domain expertise, data, and data science.
Yeah, it's I mean, and I totally agree, Chris, and certainly, you know, that I mean, we should not forget the role of governments here. I think a lot of governments are simply not aware and are not focused on a situation we have in this industry with the, you know, with this rapid change, because again, we are, dare I say it, a slightly out of sight, out of mind industry that has been, in my view, taken for granted, and we've done I think a brilliant job over many years, and now suddenly the supply chains are really stretched for the reasons we all know, and all of a sudden shipping, well, you know, actually this is all very interesting. It's as though governments are kind of waking up to this, but they have a role to play, and certainly as a sideline, I really like your point, learning as opposed to training. I think this is completely spot on, and if you take an existing regulation, the International Convention on Standards for Training and Watchkeeping, STCW, nearly 2 years ago, in November 19, in Manila at this Crew Connect conference, I called upon IMO and governments to really prioritize having a look at this and updating it, because it's more than 10 years out of date now, and there is actually commitment to update it regularly within that time frame, and it just doesn't happen. It hasn't happened, and, you know, fair enough, the IMO is very pressed on numerous other issues, but the longer this goes on, the more, the greater the disconnect between rules that, I'm sorry to say, in many cases are not obeyed anyway. I talk to seafarers and they say, well, we're not complying with it because we just can't. It's not possible. So, you know, there has to be a really good look at this STCW as a matter of urgency. But of course, at the same time, you're trying to, in a way, make or anticipate regulations going forward. And I don't underestimate the challenge of the task. It's a tremendous task, particularly, as I said right at the outset, when the fuel of tomorrow is still in, you know, it is still in the development stage.
Well, listen, I totally agree with you. I mean, listen, STCW needs to be kind of modernized and now kind of fit for purpose. In fact, I would probably extend that and challenge all of us that even SOLAS needs to be modernized and brought forward, because one of the big challenges that we face as an industry, and quite frankly, the seafarers will face this on the vessels, is the unintended safety consequences that are going to come with change. And if that change will either be in terms of decision-making relative to how data is used in terms of improving performance optimization, which will be an ingredient in going to zero carbon. It will be how they handle the new generation of fuels, which quite frankly will probably be more dynamic than static historically going forward. And I think this is going to be really important, because people are going to really need to understand that. You know, we sometimes as an industry tend to view our seafarers with 20th century eyes and require them to do 21st century, you know, requirements and be accountable and responsible and use those sets of tools. So I totally agree with you in terms of how, you know, everything, regulations and so forth have to kind of be fit for purpose. I'll give you a great example. I actually believe when you look at kind of things going forward, that data and obviously data being a value enabler for decarbonization of different fuels, that may change kind of the ship to shore balance of communication. And it's quite possible that the future seafarers, they may be spending a little bit less time on the ships, and it'd be a kind of a different, a different dynamic, just as you look at the decisions that have to be made going forward. And you know, so I'll just finish with this before I turn this over to you, Esben. Again, I get back to people are going to be the real heroes, because we talk a lot about technology, but listen, technology has no common sense, no sense of humor, and no instinct. So it is going to be the seafarers and the people that are going to drive us.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you and I, we meet seafarers in various contexts, and you know, I without wanting to generalize too much, I mean, many seafarers I speak to are worried about the future, and of course, because of the COVID crisis, I meet many who are questioning whether this is really an industry that they want to be in. So the COVID issue has brought into relief this question of the seafarer workforce, and I'm going to show off a little bit here, because we, ICS, together with PEMCO, did this report, and it's a voluminous document, but it definitely, as I said, half joking earlier, you know, Houston, we have a problem. I mean, there is a problem here, because the margin is very tight for the requirements that the report foresees, because this is a growth industry. So the margin for sort of give or take is really very, very, very tight. And to go back to the point you made about, you know, sort of, well, I think you didn't specifically say matrix, but let's say in the tanker industry, this matrix for officers is very much a requirement of the oil majors and the, you know, the charterers generally. That in a way, of course, is perfectly understandable, and it's great, but it is very time consuming, and it makes the requirements, can make them quite difficult to implement, and in a way doesn't really coincide or collaborate with what we need going ahead. And I think this report is worrying, because when the margin is so tight, and if COVID, God forbid, continues long enough, and people say, well, you know, we're not going to serve on board a ship for 14, 15 months, forget about it, we're just not going to do it. You know, that could really, really seriously affect the supply side of seafarers. And so this is really an urgent matter. As you said, the point you made earlier, is really a collaborative issue that we have to get. This is a team effort. We've got to get everybody involved in this, because otherwise, you know, the repercussions could be, and you only have to look at the supply chains now that as I mentioned a minute ago, there's a lot of potential for problems here.
No, listen, I totally agree. You know, when you look back and we reflect back over the last 18 months, you know, COVID has been clearly a disruptor, but, you know, I would give all of us some credit, and I'd say it's been in some ways as much an accelerator and a catalyst as it has been a disruptor. You know, we were when I look at kind of where we were before COVID, you know, we were actually on a digital flight path before COVID. There are a lot of discussions. In fact, we were actually going green before COVID to some extent. I think we all recognized, you know, that importance of, you know, domain expertise, data, and data science. And I think we were all beginning to, you know, come to terms with skill, you know, with what are digital skills, what is digital resiliency, what is, you know, kind of digital ergonomics, and how do we kind of begin to deal with that? You know, the importance of cyber-enabled physical systems, the importance of kind of interconnectivity and kind of a more of a systems mindset. How do you begin to kind of take data and use it to your advantage. Because I can tell you data data's a little bit like sand. It's very plentiful, okay? And with the right ingredients, you can turn it into concrete and build wonderful things. It can become a competitive advantage. But if you don't have the kind of those skill sets or know what to do with it, you turn it into sandbags and it bogs everybody down. And when you look at kind of where this industry is going, you look at this road to zero carbon, it's going to require alternate fuels, new technologies, and a greater focus on vessel optimization and performance optimization. Of course, that's where your digital skill sets are really, I think, going to come in terms of fuel consumption, speed, and so forth, especially as you're kind of beginning to meet the next generation of charter requirements. But you're out now talking about, how do you get a handle on, you mentioned it, artificial intelligence. How do you handle all the sensor information that is now beginning to come in real time? E-logs, wonderful example, just e-logs. How do you bring that in? So I think that, when you get back to when we get back to kind of what is that next generation of seafarer and how do we equip that seafarer to continue to be successful, recognizing that safety is a boundary condition in going forward. I think you're right. I think you're going to need, it's going to be the maritime academies. It's going to be the ship owners. It's going to be and operators as well as the vendors. But you're going to introduce a different mindset. There's going to be probably more emphasis on risk versus risk, kind of a greater emphasis on systems engineering to understand the interconnectivity, a greater comfort with how to take decisions, between ship and shore, for example. And I think that, we're all starting this, and I think we're working to that. It's not all going to happen, but it will happen. And I think at the end of the day, just we cannot forget the real heroes of this game, which is going to be basically the people.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Chris. Your point about, ironically, in many ways, that COVID has accelerated these various issues you raised. And in a way, that's, of course, in every crisis, there's usually something positive. And I suppose that's actually one thing that it has really focused minds on the future and on all the many challenges that you've outlined. I was going to ask you one specific question. I had some notes from a ship manager actually who said to me, we need electrotechnical officers. This is what there's going to be a huge shortage of, and this is probably a little bit, it's a bit outside my technical expertise, but what do you say to that?
Well, when you look at kind of and I'm assuming when you say I'll give you, when I look at alternate fuels, I don't know whether this is kind of where the question is going or not, but for example, one of the things that you will see is you will need hybrid solutions. You will need electrification. That is kind of an element of future-proofing going forward, in addition to looking at the different fuels, whether whether you look at LNG kind of going to hydrogen or LPG going to ammonia or even in the, in the biofuel kind of middle swim lane and pathway. But you will need to understand have an appreciation for electrification. But you can extend that, because what's going to happen now is as more information gets brought forward, the person on the vessel is going to have a much better appreciation of kind of the entire vessel based on data coming in, sensor information coming in, and so forth. We as an industry, even ABS as a class organization, we have all organized ourselves for maximum productivity and efficiency, which is basically running around verticals. Data forces us to think horizontally.
Exactly.
It will force the seafarers, the captains, the ship owners, everyone will have to now begin to look at how to take data decisions horizontally versus vertically. That's a very, very different kind of mindset. But I think that's where you're going to get some of the benefits relative to vessel performance and optimization as we go down this zero carbon pathway.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I was again talking to various ship managers on the question as, you know, who realistically can we attract. As I said earlier, we should start younger, and I think we should play up the technology opportunities, data, big data management, all these sort of things that are futuristic. I mean, this I think is likely to appeal more to a young person than sort of the you know, sort of the old salt with you know, tattoos and wait. I think because it is a different type of skill set, and so that's one thing. The other thing is that, of course, these days and our report dwells on this as well. There's been about a 45% increase in women entering the seafaring space, about 24,000, as I say, 45% up from 2015. But that is still, you know, that is still just a drop in the ocean in relation to the 1.6, 1.8 million seafarers we have globally. So, but for sure, that I think there really is actually a major growth area potentially because of the type of skill sets that you know are not necessarily getting your hands very dirty and, you know, pulling ropes and winches and that type of thing. So, I mean, it's not something not to overlook. I think the other thing is, you know, we've talked about sort of, you know, the seafarers' health issues. The mental health issue is one that keeps cropping up more and more and more for very obvious reasons against the background of COVID. But that is one that is probably not being addressed quite as much as the many other urgent challenges that need to be addressed as well. But I'm hearing more and more about it, and one would hope that tomorrow's technologies will enable a workplace that will be, it may well be stressful still, but be more, you know, not lend itself to the levels of stress and the challenges that the current seafarer faces. What do you think on that?
Well, first of all, let me go back and say I absolutely agree. When you start looking at kind of bringing non-traditional skill sets and marrying them up with traditional skill sets, you will open up opportunities in this industry. I mean, we're seeing this ourselves. I mean, we are bringing in data scientists, data engineers, computer scientists, you know, understanding, kind of marrying the domain expertise, which in the case of ABS comes from that, you know, the surveyor experience on the waterfront and on the deck plate with data and data science. So I believe that you will see this, you know, this will actually extend itself, and it's quite possible. Listen, you may have another title on ships, may not be just a chief engineer, may be a chief data engineer, you know, going forward. So, but I do agree in terms of the excitement that as we begin to extend and open ourselves up in this industry, that these non-traditional skill sets will open up opportunities for a lot of people. When you get to what I call digital ergonomics, which is a kind of an umbrella term that people,
I was going to ask you that actually.
I listen, I totally agree relative, because we've seen this even you know, through COVID, even in the office, you know, mental issues, depression, you know, working in an isolated environment for a long period of time. It is something that we have to deal with, and we have to deal with it in the context of not just the health and well-being of the seafarer, which is obviously top priority, but it then kind of moves itself into safety. And again, it gets back to, and I think all of these really, for us, when you look at everything, including the digital needs, talent for the maritime industry, it is knowing that safety is a boundary condition. How do we prepare ourselves to be able to identify and handle unintended safety consequences, either coming from, decarbonization or greater use of digital going forward. And this is going to be, I think, very, very important in terms of the resiliency and sustainability of our industry.
Absolutely. I think another one that, again, I'm kind of approaching this, the last part of our conversation, more from the angle of sources of the future seafarer. I mean, the environment is a very, very big deal for everyone globally, and it's a particularly big deal for the younger generation. And I think, we need to show the younger generation what we're doing in the environment. We need to show it better and communicate it much better than we have been, because actually we have made a lot of progress. Not that many people are particularly aware of it, but we try our utmost to get our message across that we are a largely responsible industry. We're determined to get to where we need to get to, and we have already made a lot of improvements. And I think actually this is partly kind of just awareness and knowledge. And if we could plug this aspect of our campaign, if I can put it that way, to entice younger and a different skill set into our world in the longer term, then the environment is something that I think we should bring to the table. What do you think on that?
I agree. I think that as we look at where we are and we look at kind of what is the seafarer of the future in terms of not only the skills but kind of the literacy, they're going to operate in a different world. I mean, just think about it. You're talking about things like zero carbon fuels. You're talking about dynamic fuels versus static fuels. You're talking about advanced electrification, as we talked about, innovative powertrains. Listen, onboard, I'll go, a little bit more deep, onboard decarbonization systems, active energy efficiency devices. I mean, it's no longer a kind of a linear static world. There's a lot more levers to pull in order to meet, kind of the needs of the future from an environmental point of view. I think there's going to be a greater focus on how do you begin to optimize voyages. I think there'll be even a mindset relative to performance management, how to use kind of real data to do that. I also think that as we look at kind of the new environments of learning and so forth, again, it is quite possible that there may be more. There could be a kind of what I call a rebalancing between the roles of the ship operators and the shore-based operators. I think that could change going forward. And I think, quite frankly, for the seafarers, you may actually see more onshore training, especially when you start looking at, we didn't even talk about it yet, things like smart ships, autonomous ships. How does the seafarer going to be able to continue to do what they need to do in that type of environment of, increased connectivity, greater integration between shipboard systems. Listen, I think it's actually quite exciting, to be honest with you. But I think we as an industry, we kind of have to put some boundary conditions, or what I call bumpers, around that to make sure, and it's, I guess, where regulations come in to make sure that everything is kind of synced, because the worst that could happen is the technology outpaces the regulations. And you talked about this with
every danger of that happening.
Yeah. I can tell you Solus is another one. I can tell you, I believe ISM is going to be in many ways kind of a greater safety framework going forward. And that requires, kind of a little bit of a different mindset. So a lot of things kind of have to come together in order to to be able for us to do what the industry has done very well. We have done very well, but to continue to move and in many ways continue to step up to the challenge as we have over so many years in the past.
And in the meanwhile, run our ships well with the existing seafarers and encourage them, help them in every way that we can, and because this is a transition, but we can't forget that we have a job to do here and now, and we rely on them, and we honor them as we try to do, and we want them to be recognized as these extremely key workers, important workers that they are, who have been tremendous throughout this crisis, absolutely tremendous in my view.
They are the heroes, and they will be the heroes going forward. And I think, like I said, I don't want to reiterate, we all get kind of, caught up in technology, but, technology has no common sense, no sense of humor, no judgment. If Henry Ford had access to all this data and didn't have kind of those insights, you got to ask yourself, Esben, would he have invented a faster horse or a car?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a very, very good analogy. I think we're always coming to the end here, Chris. As far as I know, I saw there was a little hand going up.